My family kept me as the grease monkey while my brother got executive pay. My cheating wife fed our secrets to competitors. So I sold my $2.8 million patents to their biggest rival, took their major clients, and watched them beg me to save the business I just destroyed. Holy cow, guys! I've been lurking on this sub for months reading your incredible stories, never thinking I'd have one worth sharing. Boy, was I completely wrong. This saga unfolded over about 18 months, and honestly, I'm still processing everything that happened. Grab some snacks and maybe clear your schedule, because this is going to be a marathon, but I absolutely promise the payoff is worth every single word. Before I dive in, I should mention that I've changed some names and minor details for obvious privacy reasons, but everything I'm about to tell you is 100% true. My lawyer actually reviewed this post before I submitted it, just to make sure I wasn't opening myself up to any legal issues. I, 32, have been working on cars since I could barely see over the hood of my dad's pickup truck. What started as handing Robert tools in his garage at age 12 has grown into what you might call an automotive empire in our county. We own the main dealership specializing in heavy-duty trucks, a high-end custom shop building everything from monster trucks to racing vehicles, plus 3 regular repair shops. My grandfather started it all in 1983 with a single-bay garage and massive dreams. By the time Dad took over in the early 2000s, we were pulling in $8 million annually with 45 employees. Then there's my dysfunctional family portrait. My older brother Derek, 35, is the self-proclaimed business genius who went to college for marketing, has never gotten his hands dirty with actual mechanical work, but could convince people to buy sand in the Sahara Desert. He's got that supernatural salesman charisma that makes customers trust him instantly, even when he's completely clueless about what he's selling. My younger sister Katie, 28, won the genetic lottery when she married hedge fund hotshot Brad 4 years ago. She's transformed into a professional trophy wife whose biggest daily challenge involves choosing between hot yoga and expensive nail salon appointments. Katie used to work part-time doing admin stuff, but after marrying Brad, decided having a job was beneath her current social status. Then there's me, the guy who actually understands internal combustion engines at a molecular level. I've got my automotive engineering degree, every ASE certification imaginable, and I've designed custom performance parts that shops 3 states over purchase because they can't find anything comparable. I can rebuild transmissions blindfolded and diagnose problems just by sound. But somehow, despite being the technical backbone generating most of our profit through innovative solutions, I was always treated like the family grease monkey while Derek got groomed for the executive suite. My real problem started 3 years ago when I met Jessica at a charity fundraiser Katie dragged me to. Looking back, that decision ranks with the Hindenburg disaster in terms of spectacular failures that should have been obviously terrible ideas. Jessica was absolutely stunning, the kind of beautiful that makes you forget your own name. Blonde hair that cost more to maintain than my truck payments, a figure that could stop traffic, and this supernatural ability to make you feel like the most fascinating person in the room. Should have been a massive red flag that someone who looked like a magazine cover model would be interested in a guy with motor oil permanently embedded under his fingernails. Initially, everything seemed perfect. She appeared impressed by the family business, loved riding in custom trucks I'd built, and seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects of my work. We had this whirlwind romance, candlelit dinners, mountain getaways, long conversations about our future. She made me feel successful and accomplished instead of just the family mechanic with some technical skills. We married after 8 months, complete with a $35,000 wedding my parents funded. Reception at the fanciest country club, live band, open bar, the whole production. Our Bora Bora honeymoon probably cost more than most people's annual car payments. But reality crashed the party hard. Jessica had very specific expectations about what marrying me meant in terms of lifestyle and financial security. She'd researched our family business online, seen articles about our success, and convinced herself that being married to an owner's son meant immediate access to luxury. The problem? While our business was successful on paper, I was still just an employee making $85,000 plus $15,000 in bonuses. Decent money for comfortable living, but definitely not new Range Rover every 2 years and quarterly European vacations money. Jessica started making increasingly pointed comments about how Derek earned significantly more despite not contributing anything meaningful. She'd complained that Katie jetted off on fancy vacations with Brad while we drove my custom F-150 that I was proud of because I'd designed it myself. She pushed me constantly to demand more money from Dad, insisting I was being taken advantage of. "You're the one with real skills," she'd say. You make this business work. Why let them treat you like hired help? The thing that stung was she wasn't entirely wrong. Derek pulled in $140,000 as VP of Sales for playing golf with customers and attending conferences at expensive resorts. His office was twice mine. He had dedicated parking and drove a loaded $60,000 GMC Sierra. Katie didn't work but had unlimited access to a company credit card for business expenses, like expensive lunches, shopping, and spa treatments, basically using family money as her personal ATM. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks, designed innovative products generating substantial revenue, trained junior mechanics, and kept the entire technical operation running. Customers specifically requested me for complicated problems. But I made significantly less than Derek with zero input on major decisions. Every time I brought up raises or additional responsibilities, Dad gave the same patronizing responses. You're learning from the ground up, or good things come to those who wait. Classic carrot-dangling manipulation. Jessica became increasingly bitter, making cutting remarks at family dinners about how I was too passive and comparing me to Brad. He's younger than you and makes 3 times as much. He didn't get there by being patient and hoping someone would notice his work. The breaking point came 18 months ago when Dad announced his 5-year retirement plan. I figured this was my opportunity to claim the leadership role I'd worked toward my entire adult life. But his succession plan felt like a professional boxer's punch to the gut. Derek would become CEO, handling all business operations, strategic planning, and financial oversight. Essentially, the company's face making all major decisions. Katie and Brad would manage finances and oversee expansion. Brad's background would secure loans and manage investments, while Katie handled personnel. And me? I'd continue running service departments with a slightly fancier title. Same job, same responsibilities, same pay scale, just Director of Service Operations on business cards instead of actual promotion. I'd remain the grease monkey while everyone else ascended to executive status. When I tried arguing my case, explaining I should have a larger role given my expertise and proven innovation track record, Dad just patted my shoulder condescendingly. Your skills are too valuable in the shop, son. We need you where you can do your best work. Translation, know your place and stay there forever. Jessica was livid that evening, ranting about how my family was using me, and I'd never amount to anything without fighting back aggressively. But then she cut deep. Maybe you're just not leadership material. Maybe some people are born to follow orders instead of giving them. That night she claimed she wasn't in the mood, and spent the evening texting some guy named Tyler, complaining about being stuck in this situation with someone satisfied with mediocrity instead of fighting for what they deserve. I should have confronted her immediately, but I was too depressed and beaten down to deal with another conflict. I was already feeling like a failure at work. The last thing I wanted was starting a fight at home, too. About 6 months after that devastating family meeting, Jessica's schedule became increasingly erratic and suspicious. She'd leave dressed to the nines for girls' nights and yoga classes, but wouldn't return until very late, sometimes the following morning. She'd dress like she was hitting a high-end nightclub for yoga class. Full makeup, expensive clothes, jewelry. When she came home smelling like expensive men's cologne that definitely wasn't mine, her stories never quite added up. We went to dinner after yoga, and then Sarah wanted to try this new bar, she'd say. But when I'd ask which restaurant or bar, she'd get vague and change the subject. Or she'd claim they saw a movie but give me a plot summary that sounded like she'd read it online instead of actually watching it. Whenever I questioned these inconsistencies, she'd immediately become defensive and accusatory. I need my own life. I can't just sit around waiting for you to make something of yourself. I need to feel like I exist as something other than your wife. Around the same time, my work frustration reached a boiling point. Derek started taking credit for the custom performance parts I'd been developing, presenting them to clients as his innovative ideas and technical breakthroughs. During client meetings, he'd say things like, "I've been working on this new modification that I think will solve your power delivery problems," or "I had an idea for improving fuel efficiency while increasing horsepower." When I confronted him about this blatant intellectual property theft, he just laughed. "Come on, we're family. What's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, right? We're all working toward the same goals here." But it wasn't just about credit. He was getting financial bonuses for these innovations I'd created. The custom parts business was generating $400,000 annually, and Derek received quarterly bonuses while I continued getting my regular salary with no additional compensation. That's when I realized I needed a comprehensive exit strategy. What my family didn't understand was that I'd been developing genuinely revolutionary modifications for heavy-duty truck engines during my personal time in my home garage. These weren't minor tweaks. We're talking fundamental performance upgrades that could increase horsepower by 30% while improving fuel efficiency by 15%. I'd been working nights and weekends, spending my own money on parts and equipment, doing research that could potentially transform the entire aftermarket industry. These innovations weren't just better than competitors' offerings, they were breakthrough technologies that could obsolete entire product categories. The real breakthrough came when I developed a method to modify ECU programming on the newest Ford and Chevrolet heavy-duty trucks, unlocking vehicles' full performance potential while maintaining complete emissions compliance, something never achieved before in the aftermarket industry. I quietly filed patents on all these innovations through my personal attorney, documenting that all development work was done on my own time using my own resources. I also began reaching out to competitors, particularly Apex Performance, whose CEO Rick Morrison had always joked about recruiting me at trade shows. When I contacted Rick about licensing my technology, he was immediately interested in not just licensing agreements, but having me join Apex full-time. Meanwhile, Jessica became increasingly obvious about her activities. She'd disappear Friday evening and return Saturday afternoon, claiming she'd crashed at Sarah's place. But I could see Sarah's social media showing her home with family during those exact times. The final red flag was her phone secrecy, taking it to the bathroom, sleeping with it under her pillow, getting nervous when it buzzed near me. I hired a private investigator for 2 weeks. The results were exactly what I expected, but still painful to see documented in black and white photographs. She was having a full-blown affair with Tyler Morrison, Rick Morrison's younger brother. Tyler worked in tech sales, drove a leased BMW that cost more than my annual salary, and lived in a fancy downtown apartment. The investigator provided comprehensive documentation, photographs at expensive restaurants, entering his apartment, shopping at upscale stores, the whole sordid situation in excruciating detail. But here's where it gets really interesting. Jessica wasn't just cheating emotionally and physically. She was systematically feeding Tyler detailed information about our family business operations through Pillow Talk. Our financials, client lists, upcoming projects, business strategies, supplier relationships. Tyler had been passing this insider intelligence to his brother Rick at Apex Performance, giving them detailed knowledge about our operations, strengths, weaknesses, and strategic plans. Now I had a choice. Confront Jessica immediately, blow up my marriage dramatically, and probably end up divorced while still trapped in the same dead-end position, watching Derek take credit for my work forever. Or I could use this entire situation to my strategic advantage, turning Jessica's betrayal and my family's disrespect into the foundation for a comprehensive revenge plan that would free me from both toxic situations while making me wealthy and successful. I chose option 2, and I'm not ashamed to admit that planning my revenge became the most satisfying project I'd ever undertaken. Instead of confronting Jessica immediately and giving her a chance to cover her tracks or warn Tyler about what I'd discovered, I decided to let her continue digging her own grave while I put my real plan into motion. Every day she continued the affair was another day I could use to prepare my exit strategy and gather more evidence of her deception. I reached out to Rick Morrison and told him I was seriously interested in discussing a comprehensive business partnership. Not just licensing my technology for a one-time fee, I wanted to sell him everything and transition to working for Apex full-time as their new director of technical innovation. Rick was absolutely thrilled by this prospect. He'd seen what I was capable of producing and understood that acquiring both me and my innovations would be enormously valuable for Apex's competitive position in the market. We started negotiating a deal where I'd sell him exclusive rights to all my patents for $2.8 million upfront, plus a $180,000 annual salary and 5% equity in the company. But I wanted much more than just a lucrative job offer and financial security. I wanted comprehensive revenge against everyone who had disrespected me, taken advantage of me, or betrayed me. I told Rick about the information leak that had been happening through Tyler and Jessica, providing him with documentation of how his brother had been feeding him insider intelligence about our business operations without proper disclosure. Rick was initially furious that his brother had been engaging in what amounted to industrial espionage, but he was also smart enough to recognize the incredible opportunity this situation presented. We developed a comprehensive plan that would not only extract me from the family business, but would systematically destroy their competitive advantages and market position in the process. The strategy was elegantly simple, but devastatingly effective. I would continue working at the family business, while secretly preparing to transfer 3 of our most valuable clients to Apex when I made my departure. These weren't just any customers. We're talking about the local mining company that spent $300,000 annually on truck modifications and fleet maintenance, the regional construction company that purchased 20 to 30 custom vehicles every year, and the professional racing team whose engines we'd been building exclusively for the past 5 years. These three clients represented approximately 40% of our annual revenue, and losing them would be absolutely catastrophic for the family business. I'd also been cultivating strong personal relationships with our key suppliers over the years, and it turned out they were getting increasingly frustrated with Dad's old-school negotiation tactics and Derek's habit of making unrealistic promises he couldn't deliver on. They preferred working with me because I actually understood the technical requirements, provided accurate timelines, and didn't jerk them around with last-minute changes or unreasonable demands. Over approximately 8 months, I quietly copied client contact information, documented all our proprietary processes and techniques, and essentially prepared to walk away with the entire technical infrastructure that made our business successful. I was careful to only copy information during my regular work hours, and only access files that were legitimately part of my job responsibilities, so I wasn't technically stealing anything or violating any computer access policies. Jessica, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly careless about her deception. She started staying out overnight during weekdays, claiming she was working on some mysterious business opportunity with friends that required evening meetings and overnight strategy sessions. She purchased an entirely new wardrobe using our joint credit cards. Sexy dresses, expensive shoes, lingerie that she definitely wasn't wearing for my benefit. She started getting expensive spa treatments regularly, professional manicures and pedicures, even started going to a high-end salon for weekly blowouts. Basically, she began spending money like she was preparing for a completely different lifestyle with someone who had significantly more disposable income than I did. The final financial red flag came when I discovered she'd opened a separate bank account at a different institution and had been systematically transferring money from our joint savings account, about $25,000 over 6 months, money that was supposed to be going toward a down payment on a house we'd been planning to buy. When I asked her directly about these transfers, she claimed it was for investment opportunities that would benefit both of us, and became angry that I was monitoring her spending like some kind of controlling husband. "I'm trying to build something for our future," she said indignantly. "I'm trying to make us money instead of just sitting around waiting for your family to decide to pay you what you're worth." But I knew the truth. She was building a financial cushion to support herself during the transition from being married to me to being supported by Tyler. That's when I knew it was time to execute my carefully planned revenge. 3 weeks ago, I had everything perfectly positioned for the most satisfying confrontation of my entire life. My deal with Apex was completely finalized, with contracts signed and money already transferred into escrow accounts. My patents were all legally transferred to Apex, with the paperwork filed and approved. I had signed agreements with all 3 major clients to move their business to Apex when I made my departure, with financial incentives that made the transition attractive for them. But I wanted to make absolutely certain that my family understood exactly why this was happening, who was ultimately responsible for the destruction of their business, and how their own actions had created the situation they were about to find themselves in. I started by setting up an elaborate trap for Jessica that would definitively prove she was still actively betraying me. I deliberately left some fabricated financial documents on my home computer, showing that the family business was planning a major expansion that would significantly increase my income and give me a substantial ownership stake. The fake documents showed a planned $5 million expansion, new government contracts worth $2 million annually, and a restructuring that would make me a full partner with a $200,000 salary and 25% ownership of the company. I made sure the documents looked completely authentic and left them in a folder on my desktop where Jessica would easily find them during one of her snooping sessions. Within 48 hours, Tyler had called Rick Morrison, asking about Apex's strategic plans to compete with our supposed expansion, and whether they should be concerned about our new government contracts. This confirmed beyond any doubt that Jessica was still actively feeding information to her boyfriend, and that Tyler was still passing that information to his brother. Then I had a carefully orchestrated conversation with Derek, where I pretended to be extremely excited about some new military contract we were supposedly bidding on, potentially worth about $1.5 million annually for custom vehicle modifications. I made sure to mention specific details about the contract requirements, the timeline for implementation, and how much additional staff we'd need to hire. I knew Derek would immediately run to Dad with this information, and they'd start making financial plans and operational changes based on revenue that would never materialize. They'd probably start recruiting additional mechanics, maybe even consider expanding our facilities to handle the increased workload. The hook was perfectly set, and all I had to do was wait for the right moment to spring the trap. That moment came last Friday, when I walked into Dad's office for our regular weekly operations meeting. Derek was there as usual, along with Katie, who'd been attending more meetings lately because Brad thought she should be more involved in the family business operations and financial planning. I sat down at the conference table and laid out my carefully prepared trap with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly how the next few minutes were going to unfold. I've been thinking seriously about the retirement transition plan we discussed, I began, and I have some significant concerns about the technical side of the business moving forward. Dad immediately perked up, probably expecting me to finally accept my designated role and stop asking for more responsibility. I've been developing some new innovations over the past few years that could potentially be worth substantial money to whoever owns them, I continued. But I want to make sure I'm properly compensated if they prove successful. Derek jumped in before Dad could respond. That's great, man. Innovation is exactly what we need to stay competitive. What kind of timeline are we looking at for implementation? Dad was nodding approvingly. Your technical skills have always been your greatest strength, son. I'm glad to see you thinking strategically about how to contribute to the company's future. That's when I dropped the first bomb. Actually, I've already filed patents for several breakthrough technologies, I said calmly. And since I developed them entirely on my own time using my personal resources, they belong to me exclusively. The conference room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. The expressions on their faces shifted from enthusiasm to confusion to dawning horror as they began to understand the implications of what I'd just said. Katie was the first to speak, her voice high and shrill. You can't do that. That has to be illegal or something. You work here. Derek was getting angry, his face flushing red. Everything you know about this business came from us. You can't just steal our intellectual property and claim it's yours. Dad was attempting to remain calm and diplomatic, but I could see the panic beginning to show in his eyes. Son, let's discuss this rationally and professionally. I'm sure we can work out some kind of mutually beneficial arrangement that recognizes both your contributions and the company's investment in your development. I smiled at all of them and delivered the line I'd been practicing. I've already worked out an arrangement with Apex Performance. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Then I dropped the second bomb. I'm quitting effective immediately, and I'll be taking my patents, my client relationships, and my supplier connections with me to my new position as Director of Technical Innovation. Derek actually stood up from his chair and got in my face, his voice shaking with rage. You backstabbing traitor! After everything we've done for you, after all the opportunities we've given you. That's when I dropped the final, most devastating bomb. Everything you've done for me? Like paying me 40% less than Derek while I generate twice as much revenue? Like planning to keep me stuck in the same subordinate position forever while you two get rich off my work? Or maybe you're referring to my wife systematically feeding inside information about our business operations to your competitors. The looks on their faces were absolutely priceless. A mixture of shock, betrayal, confusion, and dawning realization that their entire world was about to collapse. I walked out of that meeting and drove straight home, where Jessica was getting ready for another one of her girls' nights out. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, expensive jewelry, and enough makeup to supply a Broadway production. I sat her down at our kitchen table and systematically laid out everything I knew. The affair with Tyler, the secret bank account, the systematic betrayal of my trust, the information leaked to Apex Performance, all of it laid out with documentation and evidence. She initially tried the denial route. I don't know what you're talking about. You're being paranoid and controlling. Then she quickly switched to the blame-shifting strategy. This is your fault. If you had any ambition, if you fought for what you deserved instead of just accepting whatever scraps your family threw at you, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for someone who actually has goals and drive. Finally, when those approaches failed, she just became vicious. Tyler treats me like a queen. He has ambition. He has plans. He's actually going somewhere in life while you're content to be your daddy's little grease monkey forever. I just laughed, actually laughed out loud, and delivered the news that made her face go completely white. Tyler's brother fired him yesterday after discovering the information leak, and Apex is planning to sue him for industrial espionage. Good luck building a future with an unemployed guy who's about to be blacklisted from his entire industry. Then I delivered the final blow. Oh, and Jessica, I'm filing for divorce on Monday morning. Good luck explaining to your lawyer where that $25,000 went and how you're going to support yourself now that your sugar daddy is broke. She immediately started crying and begging, saying it was all a terrible mistake and she wanted to work things out between us. that she'd learned her lesson and would be a better wife. Too little, way too late, and completely unconvincing given that she was literally dressed up to go see him when I confronted her. But that dramatic confrontation was just the opening act of my revenge symphony. Over the weekend, Apex Performance made a series of strategic announcements that sent shockwaves through our entire industry. They announced they were launching a revolutionary new performance division featuring exclusive breakthrough technology that would completely transform the heavy-duty truck market and obsolete current aftermarket solutions. They also announced they'd hired several industry experts, including a new director of technical innovation with an exclusive patent portfolio, and had secured partnerships with major clients in the mining and construction sectors. My family's phones started ringing off the hook immediately, clients calling to cancel existing orders, suppliers asking if the rumors about serious financial problems were accurate, competitors sensing blood in the water, and circling like sharks looking for opportunities to poach customers and employees. By Monday morning, Dad was calling me every hour, his voice getting more desperate with each message. Derek had left approximately 15 increasingly frantic voicemails alternating between threatening me with legal action for corporate sabotage and begging me to reconsider my decision and come back to work things out as a family. Even Katie was texting me constantly, saying I was destroying the family legacy and being incredibly selfish by abandoning everyone who ever supported me. But the real scope of the damage became crystal clear over the following few days, as the full implications of my departure became apparent to everyone involved. Without my innovations and with the major clients gone, the family business was looking at roughly a 60% drop in revenue almost immediately. The custom parts business that generated $400,000 annually was completely gone. The three major clients represented another $1.2 million in annual revenue. Combined with the loss of my technical expertise and the relationships I'd built with suppliers, they were looking at potential business failure within months. Dad had also made a critical strategic error based on the false information I'd fed him through Derek. He'd taken out a $3.2 million business loan to fund a planned expansion, confident that the increased revenue from government contracts would easily cover the monthly payments. Now he was staring at potential bankruptcy with no way to make the loan payments. But I wasn't finished with my revenge yet. What my family didn't realize was that I'd also been documenting some of their more questionable business practices over the years. Nothing major or criminal, but regulatory violations that could cause serious problems if the appropriate agencies decided to investigate. Things like warranty fraud, charging manufacturers for warranty work that was actually caused by customer modifications, manipulating emissions compliance reports to make modified vehicles appear to meet environmental standards when they actually didn't, paying certain workers under the table to avoid payroll taxes and workers' compensation insurance. Small-scale stuff that most shops engage in to some degree, but definitely enough to trigger comprehensive investigations and audits that would cost them hundreds of thousands in fines, legal fees, and compliance costs. I made sure the appropriate regulatory agencies found out about all of it through anonymous but detailed reports. Anonymous tips to the EPA regarding emissions violations, with specific vehicle identification numbers and dates. Detailed reports to the IRS about unreported income and payroll tax avoidance, with documentation of cash payments and off-the-books work. Complaints to the State Labor Department about worker safety violations and insurance fraud. Nothing that would result in criminal charges against anyone, but definitely enough to trigger multiple simultaneous investigations that would consume enormous amounts of time, money, and energy while they were already dealing with the crisis of losing most of their revenue. 2 weeks after I quit, Dad showed up at my apartment at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. Unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes that looked like he'd slept in them, driving his personal pickup truck instead of the company Escalade he usually drove everywhere. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk. I need to talk to you." I let him in and offered him something to drink. He sat at my kitchen table and just stared at the surface for several minutes before he could work up the courage to speak. "The bank's calling the loan," he finally said. "We've got 30 days to come up with $800,000 in cash, or they're seizing all the business assets. Everything your grandfather built, everything we've worked for, it's all going to be gone." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted him to feel the full weight of what he was asking me to do. Derek thinks we can restructure everything. Maybe bring in outside investors or find a buyer for part of the business, but he paused and looked directly at me with tears forming in his eyes. "The clients won't come back without you. They don't trust the company name. They trust you personally." They know you were the one solving their problems and creating the innovations they relied on. Maybe you should have considered that before treating me like hired help for 15 years, I replied calmly. He nodded slowly, accepting the criticism without argument. You're absolutely right. We messed up badly. I messed up badly. He looked directly at me with complete vulnerability. I was scared, okay? Scared that if I gave you too much authority or ownership, you'd eventually leave and start your own competing business. Scared that you were more talented than me, and everyone would figure that out eventually. This was the first time in my entire life that my father had ever admitted weakness or insecurity to me. For 32 years, he'd maintained this facade of confidence and authority, never acknowledging that he might be wrong about anything, or that he might need help from anyone. Derek's not cut out for this kind of responsibility, he continued. He can sell products and he's good with customers, but he doesn't understand the technical complexities that make this business work. Without you, we're just another generic repair shop competing on price instead of expertise. He pulled out a thick folder full of legal documents and spread them across my kitchen table. This is a new partnership agreement that my lawyer drew up. 40% ownership of everything, complete control of all technical operations, $150,000 starting salary with annual increases tied to company performance. We restructure the entire business, make you a genuine partner with real authority and decision-making power. I looked through the papers carefully. It was actually a remarkably generous offer, significantly more than I'd ever expected them to be willing to give me, and definitely more than they'd ever been willing to consider during all those years when I was begging for recognition and fair compensation. What happens to Derek and Katie in this arrangement? I asked. Derek gets 30% ownership and focuses exclusively on sales and customer relations. No more involvement in technical decisions or trying to take credit for innovations he doesn't understand. I keep 30% and gradually transition to an advisory role. Katie gets bought out completely. She and Brad can take their money and invest in something else entirely. The offer was genuinely tempting. This represented everything I'd wanted for years. Real authority, financial security, genuine respect from my family, recognition for my contributions. It would solve all the problems that had driven me to this point, but it was also too late. Way too late. I appreciate the offer, Dad. I really do. And I can see that you're finally being sincere about wanting to change things, I said carefully. But I've already made commitments to Apex, and honestly, I don't trust that things would actually change long term. This feels like a desperate attempt to save the business rather than a genuine recognition of my value. He started crying then, actually sobbing like a child. I know I was a terrible father and an even worse boss. I know I played favorites, and I know I took you for granted for years. I know I let Derek and Katie take advantage of the situation while you did all the real work. But please don't let the business die because of my mistakes. Your grandfather built this from absolutely nothing. That emotional appeal hit me harder than I'd expected it to. Grandpa had been my hero growing up, the person who taught me to work with my hands and take genuine pride in craftsmanship and quality work. He'd started with nothing and built something meaningful that provided good jobs for dozens of people and served the community for decades. The business doesn't have to die, I said carefully, but it definitely has to change dramatically, and you have to accept that the days of it being a family empire are over. Dad looked up hopefully, willing to accept any terms that might save what was left of his life's work. Here's my counteroffer, and it's non-negotiable, I continued. I'll license back limited rights to some of my older patents, enough to keep you competitive in the market, but not enough to dominate it or threaten Apex's position. I'll also provide consulting services for existing clients during a 6-month transition period to help maintain those relationships. In exchange, you pay all my legal fees for the divorce proceedings, plus a consulting fee of $50,000, and you publicly acknowledge that the innovations that built this business were primarily my work. It wasn't enough to completely save the business or restore it to its former glory, but it would give them a realistic fighting chance to reinvent themselves as a smaller, more focused operation that could potentially survive and even thrive in a more limited market niche. Dad agreed to every term immediately, without any negotiation or attempts to modify the arrangement. Derek wasn't happy with the new arrangement, but he didn't have much choice in the matter. With Katie being bought out completely and me serving as a consultant rather than an employee or partner, he'd have to actually step up and learn to run the business properly, or watch it collapse entirely under his management. The real surprise came when Jessica's divorce lawyer contacted me about settlement negotiations. Apparently, she'd been telling everyone who would listen, including her lawyer, that Tyler was going to marry her and support her in the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to expecting. But when Tyler got fired from his job and subsequently sued by Apex for corporate espionage and breach of confidentiality, he disappeared completely from her life, just packed up his belongings and left town overnight, leaving her with nothing but debt, a destroyed reputation, and no prospect of the financial security she'd been counting on. She actually had the audacity to call me directly and ask if we could reconcile, saying she'd learned her lesson about what really matters and wanted to support my success moving forward now that I was making real money with Apex. I laughed out loud and hung up on her without saying a word. The divorce proceedings went through without much drama after that. She initially tried to claim half of my Apex settlement and ongoing salary, but since I'd earned that money after we separated and she'd committed adultery with extensive documented evidence, her lawyer strongly advised her to accept a minimal settlement and disappear quietly rather than risk having her infidelity and financial misconduct become public record. Last week, I got a text message from Derek. Custom truck order came in from the mining company. Can you help with the engine specifications? We'll pay your consulting rate. It felt genuinely good to be needed and valued, instead of just expected to perform without recognition or fair compensation. But the absolute best part of this entire story happened last weekend. I was at a regional car show with my new girlfriend Sarah, who's an incredibly talented mechanic that runs her own classic car restoration shop. We were checking out some vintage muscle cars and talking to other enthusiasts when who do I see working behind the counter at a chain restaurant in the food court but Jessica. She looked absolutely miserable. Cheap uniform, tired eyes, the kind of beaten-down expression that comes from having all your delusions completely shattered by reality. She was taking orders from teenagers and cleaning tables, probably making minimum wage plus tips. She saw me and actually tried to approach us, but I just took Sarah's hand and walked away without acknowledging her existence. Some people need to learn their lessons the hard way, and I wasn't interested in providing any relief from the natural consequences of her choices.